Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Former Army medic here. Time for a bedtime story. People join the military for a few different reasons. Some from a patriotic standpoint, others for better socioeconomic status, and a few more because of tradition, or a mix therein. I was a mix of all three, though admittedly some more than others. Women loves them some uniforms and shiny medals. But there I was, no shit young lad, 1 year post 9/11, shipping out to Fort Benning, Georgia for some boot. After a few months there, I went to Fort Sam Houston to get my medical learning on. EMT course, shortened into a few weeks, was an enjoyable experience. Nothing says fun like training in late summer Texas heat dressed in Mop 4. I had haphazardly chosen the job as medic on the false promise of air-conditioned aid stations and hot nurses. They weren't total lies, though. The Fobbits enjoyed air conditioners and Xboxes, and the ER nurses with 30 years experience were probably hot lil things back in their day. But I was not lucky enough for that. Still, I fell in love with the profession. One of my patients during my clinical rotation was missing nearly half of his right upper and lower abdomen to a bad MRSA infection, which was caused due to lack of movement post-op. Fluid sat, went stagnant so to speak, and infection set in. A second medic and I were doing a dressing change on his wound. He was removing the old prior to my laying down the new. As he pulled up, a stitch got caught, and instead of releasing pressure and either working around it or using scissors to cut around it, his response was to tug a wee bit harder. Hindsight is always 20/20, so pop goes a stitch and squirt goes a little blood, and to this day I remember their expressions perfectly. The private's jaw dropped as he went slightly pale, and the poor patient had an equally face-freezing look of shock on him. I just dropped my hand and pinched down with the gauze already in hand, but as Private started to panic, I paid more notice to the patient. Former Army medic here. Time for a bedtime story. People join the military for a few different reasons. Some from a patriotic standpoint, others for better socioeconomic status, and a few more because of tradition, or a mix therein. I was a mix of all three, though admittedly some more than others. Women loves them some uniforms and shiny medals. But there I was, no shit young lad, 1 year post 9/11, shipping out to Fort Benning, Georgia for some boot. After a few months there, I went to Fort Sam Houston to get my medical learning on. EMT course, shortened into a few weeks, was an enjoyable experience. Nothing says fun like training in late summer Texas heat dressed in Mop 4. I had haphazardly chosen the job as medic on the false promise of air-conditioned aid stations and hot nurses. They weren't total lies, though. The Fobbits enjoyed air conditioners and Xboxes, and the ER nurses with 30 years experience were probably hot lil things back in their day. But I was not lucky enough for that. Still, I fell in love with the profession. One of my patients during my clinical rotation was missing nearly half of his right upper and lower abdomen to a bad MRSA infection, which was caused due to lack of movement post-op. Fluid sat, went stagnant so to speak, and infection set in. A second medic and I were doing a dressing change on his wound. He was removing the old prior to my laying down the new. As he pulled up, a stitch got caught, and instead of releasing pressure and either working around it or using scissors to cut around it, his response was to tug a wee bit harder. Hindsight is always 20/20, so pop goes a stitch and squirt goes a little blood, and to this day I remember their expressions perfectly. The private's jaw dropped as he went slightly pale, and the poor patient had an equally face-freezing look of shock on him. I just dropped my hand and pinched down with the gauze already in hand, but as Private started to panic, I paid more notice to the patient. Back to combat, though. My Unit 11 Cav was settled just behind the Perfume Palace post-invasion. It was rumored that the larger complex was the drug orgy palace for Uday and Qusay, Saddam's sons. I know not of that, but I do have carnal knowledge of the Yellow Porsche of Baghdad, some divisional assets, Iraqi Surveying Group, ISG, and a few other alphabets had set up shop there. My unit ran patrols through the south side of the city. One battalion to cover 50% of an entire division's area of operation. It was said this special Cav unit were the bastards of the lot, but we had the big mobile guns, so they always called for our help, especially our air assets. We almost never had those fuckers with us. When we would operate raids, it was a standard stack, breach, get people down, and if God forbids someone pops up armed, they get light. Non-threats are not harmed, though zip ties and sandbags were very common. No one was overly abused in our hands. War is hell, even for the families. There was one family we kidnapped in the middle of the night, and I use the term properly, as the mother, daughter, and youngest sons should not have been taken as they were. I felt worse for the oldest daughter, as she was complaining, as had an exam she would miss due to being in U.S. custody. This was easily confirmable, as we were in regular contact with the university people. This was a few months post-invasion. But this is just one of many cases of low-level issues in a combat zone. Families suffer even if we don't care to see it, there and at home. Traffic control points were a tedious task at times. On the one hand, you are relaxing, sorting through traffic, yet at the same time, any car, person, or soda can could go boom at any moment. Tank drivers would catch naps as they were safe in their tin can, but us outside had a hooting good time. Anything from two old ladies fighting over metal gas cans to a man running up with a deceased child yelling for help. And you can't help him because you can already see the kid has been dead for some time, and you can't as well perform an autopsy to answer why he is no longer living. With the language barrier and the acute awareness that something can still go boom, it sure beats bungee jumping. This was life, though. This is what war is. People die. Sometimes not your fault. Sometimes it is. Families get bothered, some more than others, but why? My unit would do many quick reaction force QRF missions where we would rush out yelling, "Yeehaw," as we rode out to save the 82nd guys or the spooks out operating in the night. Our armor between the tanks, Bradleys, and M113S were much to be desired, which is why we always got tossed in the middle. Death before dismount. Anyhow, this is how I first had my official taste of the red-colored pill we call tinfoil hat it is. We had two missions. One was the regular Army shit, and the other was not so Army shit. It was and it wasn't. Taskforce 20 was a mix of ISG, CIA, SF, SEALs, Delta, Ranger 101st, 1AD, mishmash team. It was later reflagged as Taskforce 121 due to unspoken reasons. The day-to-day was as it was. Patrol, raid, TCP, patrol some more. Oh shit, found a stockpile of missiles. Wait 18 hours for EOD, patrol some more, kick in more doors. Task force time, HVT time. There were two types of raids, low-level raids based off of local intel, and HVT, high-value target raids, which were more elaborate. The target was a big one, be they Bathe Party member or general or businessman. Sometimes 3 locations with simultaneous hit times. The fun part of them was the constant new fun we were getting into. Killing Saddam's sons and stealing their yellow Porsche was one such fun time this task force had. When the regular Army or Special Forces or SEAL operators conducted a raid, high-value target or otherwise, it was always standard and legit. However, when the spooks headed shit, their rules of engagement was minutely different. Instead of breach, drop, bag, it was breach, shoot everything. I run out of toe tags. As a medic, this bothered me greatly. My job was to preserve life on the battlefield. To see such reckless discharge, willfully menacing and targeting innocents, perturbs me. You try to bring it up the chain, but when the chain is the problem, where do you go? Further up. War is hell, they would say. But hey, bad grammar aside, a bad guy is dead, and we might have a real election in Iraq soon. So all is well, right? There were non-combat missions as well with this task force. One in particular was called an ICE mission. We ended up doing a few of them throughout. When you think ICE, you think shiny diamonds, money, Benjamin, sir, it's all about the bennies. We were escorting the transportation of millions upon billions of dollars. All cash US dollars, as mentioned before. There was 400 million US per pallet. And there were 2 52-foot trailer trucks filled with pallets. Big math. We took this cash from BIP down Route Irish Highway 8, or IED Alley as we like to call it, all the way downtown to a vault guarded by the biggest goddamned Iraqis I have ever seen. Former Republic Guard turned private bank security. For them, the pay and chance to live was better for them. So into the vault the money goes, and never again is it seen. It a misconception. The money didn't disappear. The money was used to buy male children for the Thursday night dancing boy parties, or used to bribe public officials like a guy named Al-Sadr, or to buy weapons for the enemies which we were fighting to begin with. Talk about misappropriation of funds. Better to say, as Rumsfeld said, The money was lost. I do not know where it went. Then, to tell the truth, the State Department sanctions a child slave ring. We are arming our own enemies, and we are bribing our newly placed puppet government to try and buy some sort of keeping the peace. You should check into what happened next. Google the Mahdi uprising, April 2004. We funded that. It blew up in our face. But yes, history never repeats itself. Back on track, the money is lost. All is well. People die, but democracy lives. We can all see that that is a lie. Just today, 11 neighborhoods in my once hometown of Baghdad were hit with car bombs and self-end bombers. 11. We created this. Murdered families, billions of tax dollars wasted, billions more lost. Trillions upon trillions flopped around misconstrued, and for what? Democracy, freedom, humanity, national security, national interests. I have so many other war stories about torture amongst many others, but the purpose behind it all is what I want to focus on. War crimes are war crimes, and all will pay eventually. But this conversation is about the why, or the who, or the what the hell am I even talking about? Cui bono, a Latin phrase for as a benefit to whom. If you ever want to know why or who would ever, always ask, who would benefit? Who benefits from war? Monetarily, the defense contractors, the KBRs, Halliburtons, Raytheons, DAPRAs, Boeings, the banks. Why are the banks profiting from war? Before Iraq and Libya got snuffed out by NATO, they were once one of a dozen or less countries in the world whose currency was not owned by the Roth-owned central banks. The number is now less than half that. Also note the countries of this list and the ones listed by General Wesley Clark, telling indeed. This is where I was naive as a private. I knew the bankers were in Iraq, I knew the corruption as I saw it firsthand, but I never got the big picture until a little later. The writing is on the wall is a statement truer than any other. All the evidence is out there, but I understand people do not wish to have their comfort nudged. Complacency is a bitch. Now this is where we are most likely to have an impasse. People often point blame at the government. To imply the military or the government itself is self-driven or self-functioning is the greatest lie sold to the American public ever. People have used the term shadow government, but rest assured, they have not been hiding in the shadows since circa 1980s. The military-industrial complex, as President Eisenhower called it, alongside of the secret societies President John F. Kennedy spoke of in reference to the Federal Reserve along with other groups, work together to pervert our nation's people and resources for their own wanton desires. These groups, which people have mislabeled as Illuminati, do have actual names and actual purposes, some less menacing than others. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group, or the Three Sisters as they are known. Those are the pseudo-faces of the ruling class. This is where we have an issue. Having witnessed corruption and war crimes firsthand, I was once all for open revolt against the federal government, but this is wrong. The government only does what it is told to do by these other entities. Our economy is ran by a private bank, or the military is force-fed equipment that is not too standard to feed the MIT, and the people are kept divided arguing over emotional politics that have no place at the federal level. Divide and conquer. History 101. If we revolt, though, we will be fighting our own police and National Guard and military. This is what they want. They are all just victims just as we are. Even the politicians deserve no harm, as they are just victims of greed, power, and money-wise. Even if we did off all of DC, once replaced, the corrupting and driving factors still remain. Private corporate entities run our government. There is no hiding this. Now I am willing to take any claim previously made to be challenged. I in fact encourage it. I can back it all either with personal photographs or other cross-referenced cited sources. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. From a soldier's view, war means only one thing. Make sure your buddy makes it home. Politics means shit when you are drowning in a sea of bullets, but it's good to know it was all for the best. Humanity was restored. Democracy and freedom are flourishing, and I think it's time for a break. If you actually read this and had questions or anything else, feel free, and if not, c'est la vive. Besides, this is the internet, so I'm obviously lying. Either way, the only people who support war are the people who never saw it for themselves or those who profit. Fuck Syria. We created the problem via CIA subversion. The president is just a puppet for the global elite, and the American people for no longer giving a shit about their own goddamn nation. Our apathy is why Detroit is the way it is, why DC is as corrupt as it is. It is our fault that we allow this to persist. always end with a smiley face. Fun story about a bridge. My first date with Al Sadr. By April 2004, my unit had already been in the country for 12 months since we invaded. 10% of people had already made it back to Germany on the Advan party, and yet another 80% had already made it down south to Kuwait to put the vehicles through the wash racks and prep them to get on the boats when it all happened. 1st Cav had taken over 1st Armored Division's area of operation. A handover is always a good time to strike. The Mahdi uprising had just begun. A man by the name Muqtada al-Sadr, an influential cleric in the country, had received funding from the CIA discretionary budget, courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer, decided to use the funds to create his own militia and strike back at the U.S. forces. While myself and about a dozen other soldiers, including my first sergeant, waited for the last wheel convoy out of the country, I decided to ring my mother. The night before had been an interesting one. Sometime around 0:30, the 4th of July, commenced outside of our forward operating base Camp Slayer, South Baghdad. The remaining soldiers consolidated at the TAC and set up an Alamo. Humvee with a 50 cal backed up to the front door. Back door sand bagged off. Up on the roof, 2 saws and 2 more 50s. The 50s held the 12 and 6 position, and then saws were in the 2 and 10. We weren't too worried about the rear as we had BAP runways behind us in the distance. Our main threat was the molten metal rain coming from the city right over our walls. The night continues with fun that any Call of Duty player can describe. As with any good firefight, Desarov was on the 50 wearing nothing but the brown issue undies, shower shoes, and his body armor. Come morning, the dust had settled and we were more than ready to get the fuck out of there, to get the fuck back home. So I hopped on the landline that was still continuing in our radio room. Go to give Mom a call before I hop back over the border. So my mom answers, and the first thing out of her mouth, giggity, is, "So when are you coming home?" I respond lightly with, "I can say exactly OPSEC and all, but soon." Well, that's not what they're saying on CNN. Oddly perplexed and momentarily stunned, I am not even afforded the time to respond as she continues, "You're in 1st Armored, right? All the channels are saying your division isn't going anywhere for a while, and that everyone is getting called back to the country." At that time, I no longer wished to continue the conversation, so I just hung up without saying bye, grabbed my musket, and stepped outside the hooch. With impeccable timing, 1st Sergeant B is stepping in as I am leaving, so I take the fortunate moment to make a query. "Hey Top, I just got off the phone. Care to tell me anything?" He gave a slight smirk as he chuckled out his response. "Hope you didn't throw your mattress away yet, Doc." A few more nights under the desert sun confirmed. During the night of 1,000,000 people, utter exaggeration, the Mahdi blew all 7 bridges in and around Baghdad, making my units return into the city to be slightly delayed. Waiting on the engineers is always a fun task. On an odd note, I was lucky. I had never left our camp, so I never had that false sense of making it out alive. I kind of felt bad for the people down at Camp Doha, Kuwait, enjoying their ice cream and MWR tents. Even worse for the people already back in Germany enjoying the fine beer. Our fun wasn't near over, so a few more fun days pass, and the majority of my unit makes it back to base. Now, what's the best thing you can do if you just pissed off a bunch of guys who haven't had a decent girl in 12 months and have a shit ton of weapons at their disposal? Well, give them a shitload more ammo and tell them to go clear out of town. That's what. Sometime between Kuwait and heading out for this mission, Supply had received a second ammo shipment, with odd instructions. Keep 1 combat load here at home. Added to only taking half of what we had into battle, we were instructed specifically not to have any radio chatter regarding contact. This is going to be a clean op and all rounds will be accounted for. The on-the-book ammo would be all accounted via the ammo left back. Do what your fucking job, I just don't want to hear shit about it. Sadly, during the op, there was one slip. Good old tanker. During the excitement after popping a dude twice in the chest, good old Private First Class Anon chirps, "Target down," over the battalion net instead of the squad net. No one ever took blame. After the SCO hopped on the horn and screamed, "Who the fuck had contact? Identify yourself." The following didn't come from Bandit, ask Comanche. Wasn't Comanche, try Gator. So forth and so on made it clear he would never be properly answered. Back to the mission, though. We're going to hit the city, circle it up, have our Kiowas fly over and drop leaflets. They will have 12 hours to vacate the city. Any that remain will be considered an enemy combatant. The circle came quick, and the next 12 hours of searching everyone as they left the town could not end quick enough. So many people makes for a delightful target. The next 72 hours to follow would be the most memorable moments of my life. 72 hours, no sleep, no timeouts, no, dudes, I got a crap. Can you hang on a second? Oh, the glory to follow. On day one, we had a Bradley versus Bradley accident while people were chasing the infamous white pickup truck with the mortar tube in the back. We had that following evening a butter bar lieutenant call and an artillery strike. This was a good one. Bandit Maine, this is Blue 1, over. Blue 1, Black 5, over. Black 5, addressing our XO. Blue 1 requesting fire at Mike Bravo number. Roger Blue 1 confirming fire for Mike Bravo yada. Make sure you get a fix on all your guys before we drop this. This is Blue 1, Roger. Radio silence. Nothing. Time clicks by. Silence. Our XO begins to get impatient. Blue 1, this is Black 5 requesting a sit rep. More silence. No response. Blue 1, this is Black 5. What the fuck are you doing? Black 5. This is Blue 1. That's a negative on the fire request. It was my third squad element that was on the rooftop. The guy had requested a drop on his own men. Had the XO not told him to check on his guys, he would have killed them. The ass chewing to follow over the net gave even Full Metal Jacket's DS scene a run for its money. XO was a cool guy, straight up NASA rocket scientist. Used the army to pay for his college using the ROTC program and got activated for the invasion of Iraq. During this same 72-hour playdate, the XO tried a little experiment. Does Gatorade taste better when it is mixed with warm water first then chilled, or mixed with cold water? Sadly, toward the end of the taste test by the nearby soldiers, he realized that the answer was subjective to one's own taste, and therefore the entire process was a waste of time. He got a bit flustered, but not as twisted as the next guy. He was the second highest NCO in the mortar platoon. Outstanding guy. Day 1 and Day 2 seemed reasonable considering what it was. Clear house, pop, clear the next, one by one. Rooftop exchange. This staff sergeant got tired of small arm fire exchanges after a while. Not sure exactly what caused the snap, but whatever it was had to be good. Middle of the op, he takes off his Kevlar and IBA, takes his M4 and puts it in his M113, grabs out a couple 8.4s and gets back into the game. After the firefight calmed down, the NCO grabbed a fresh AT4 and slung it, leaving his rifle in his vehicle. Being the doc and wanting to make sure not all his screws were lost, I approached him and asked, "Sup, Sarge, how you doing?" "I got a rocket," was all he would reply with. I figured the safest bet was to let him be and let this battle sort him out. Let him get it out of his system, so to speak. So towards the end of day, two things started to pick back up a little bit. A few pockets of resistance remained in the town, and they weren't going out quietly. My M113 ambulance was set on the western edge of our perimeter, sitting atop a bridge and overpass, really going over another highway. So with the big red crosshairs, I mean medical cross, made for an excellent target. A mortar team took that afternoon to bracket our position. They had to shoot from the hip and while on the run, so they continued to shoot to the left and to the right of our position, walking the rounds in, so to speak, over time. It was a delicate cat and mouse game. We on top of the bridge realized what they were doing and request to drop underneath for a bit of added coverage. "Fuck that," said that the CO. "Hold your fucking position." Fuck. Nature's calling. What do? Drop trow. Cut open an MRE bag down the side. Squat down and hold the bag underneath. 3 shreds of 1-ply TP the MRE provides. Time to toss it out. Poke my head out the top. Gently swing the pouch over the side of the bridge. Shit bomb away. Poke head out a little further to want the impact. Oh shit. Is that the mortar's M113? Literally laugh out loud. Incoming dirty bomb. Oh shit, I think it's gonna hit them. Slow-mo poo fall. The vehicle is fast enough. It falls just a few feet behind them. Could have been funnier, but no. Dusk is coming. Bracket barrage number 4 or 5. Fuck. They actually hit the bridge this time. Rev up. Time to move a little. Fuckers got us zeroed. Enter CO. Duh fuck you doing? Stay put and hold that shit. They got us, man. Fuck you, sit there and die. He didn't actually say the die part, but defend to death was certainly implied hard enough. Waiting for the inevitable. Sun is starting to go down. Well, might as well take one more pick before I die. So sitting atop my vehicle, I took one last pick, my last sunset. My body is ready. My mind was ready as well. Bennett was the only soldier with us that had kids. I was single, and so was the other medic with me. So we decided that Bennett had the first roving patrol. We had been up for 50 or 60 hours and fuck it. We were going to die anyhow. I'm going to catch a nap. Bennett being out had a greater chance to survive once shit started to fall. Wagner and I said our goodbyes. Nice knowing you. See you on the other side. Was an odd feeling laying down knowing you weren't going to wake up. Exhaustion and peace set in quickly as I passed right out, no longer giving a fuck, openly accepting my own death, coming to terms with God. Fuck all of it. Close the eyes and go to sleep. In excellent fashion, we are awoke by the deafening blasts of mortar fire, artillery fire, and small arms fire. Jumping up, I praise the glory of my death and welcome it with open arms. Woo-hoo, time to go splat. To all of you readers' displeasure, Bennett came running over screaming over the noise of the fireworks. It's outgoing, it's outgoing. Well, fuck me. I got all excited over nothing. I understand that this is rather anticlimactic. It is. I made it out of that town, as did all my fellow soldiers. Not one loss. On the flip side, no one that was left in the city, man, woman, or child, was as lucky as we were. We returned to our forward operating base. City cleared and retaken. Job well done, no loss of life on our end. All ammo accounted for. No contact reports, no record of civilian deaths, no record. Killed numerous households, never happened. Wiped out an entire fucking city. If you don't write it down, it never happened.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.